Rumble is an incredibly difficult game. Man, I can never hit the jump. No. And one of the things that makes Rumble difficult is the host-client connection. When you're new to Rumble and you load into a match, you may realize that your movements feel delayed. See, Rumble doesn't use servers to mediate the connection between players. Rather, it's a peer-to-peer game, which means there's always one host and one client. The host gets to play on their own machine with no ping or lag, almost as if they were in the gym, and the client has to play with every movement making a full round trip from their computer to the host's and then back to their own. There are some exceptions, of course, like running, dashing, and jumping, but for the most part, everything goes through this. This can be very frustrating for new players, since when you start out, you're already struggling enough just to summon the structures, and having to factor in a sizable delay can be really frustrating. A lot of players really struggle to win when they have a quarter second or more of delay, which doesn't sound like much, especially coming from flat screen games, but in VR, you really feel it. It's almost impossible to perform certain setups like flight on client too. So, why is it in the game? Why not just use servers? Well, with servers, every movement still has to make the full round trip from you to the server and back. It's just that the server might experience less ping, and every fight would be even, which some people like the idea of. But if you've struggled on client, imagine playing on a slightly better client all the time. Instead of getting perfect ping half the time and a quarter second the rest, you might be dealing with a fifth of a second of ping all the time. Most people will agree that host and client are a good thing for the game. While the advantage might make tournament match rules a little bit odd, many people really enjoy being able to play at zero ping. What this means is that pretty much every match happens with at least 2 full rounds, because each player will want at least one host round. It also means that certain movements that might be very difficult usually are, on client, much easier. A great example of this is the strupper kick, which is a pretty hard 3-hit combo of a straight uppercut kick, but is made far easier on client than on host. This is because you experience both the lag and ping associated with client, which means that you get extra time to perform the combo. It's pretty easy to tell if you're on client. For one, there's just a mod called Client Host Info, which will tell you at the start of each round. But the feel of the game is also so different that you will be able to tell almost immediately unless you're playing with someone with a really good internet connection and who lives really close by. At the end of each round, you switch from host to client, and vice versa depending on which one you played as. And you can actually control which you start as by queuing before someone. On host, you can perform some extremely difficult movements like flight, bumps, and all sorts of movement tech with a lot of consistency. On client, though, you get the benefit of both lag time and frankly, some jank. See, on client, the game will give you extra time to do movements, which makes hit combos and pace play much easier. Additionally, tools like hold flight that kind of require a little bit of leeway work much better on client than on host. And certain movements that rely on speed, like disc jumps, are both more consistent and much easier on client, because the jump itself occurs immediately, while the disc is delayed, which allows the disc and the jump to be executed at exactly the same time, giving you far more speed. The downside to this, though, is that you can't really use any defensive moves, since something like parry is very difficult to hit with a quarter second or so of delay. Additionally, things like RTSs and flick grabs can be very dangerous and difficult. Hitboxes too are affected. The game feels like the hitboxes are just larger because of the weird delays and your hitbox lagging behind, which can cause you to hit things that you really feel like you shouldn't. This leads us to what shift stones one might use on host and client. See, on host, you can play very aggressively, since you'll almost always win cube launches, fights to grab an object, and you can perform a lot more close-range maneuvers and movement tech. On client, though, because you can play with an extremely high spawn pace quite easily and hit very difficult hit combos, it's rather easy to play the game very defensively. You also really want to win your client rounds, so you're incentivized to play in a sort of boring meta style anyway, since in a tournament setting, you can only win if you've won more client rounds than your opponent. This leads us to what kinds of shift stones people use. Commonly on client, you'll see defensive shift stones like adamant, stubborn, and volatile, whereas on host you might see a lot more of charge, surge, and flow. The host stones work very well with a lot of finesse and a lot of control, which you get from host. But the client stones work very well even when you're just pretty much sitting still, because they're very defensive. The one exception to this is that you will sometimes see flow on client, since it allows client flight to be much more consistent. Hey, so I believe that's everything I needed to cover for the video. I am trying some new things, like all the graphics I inserted, terrible Microsoft Paint images, and I decided to use the Halo soundtrack instead of my usual sort of copyright-free lo-fi stuff, since I think it gives it just a little bit more of a laid-back and unique feel. Of course, making videos like this is a little bit harder. If you have any thoughts, let me know, but that is all. I will see you guys around.